Dwyer. I teach English here at the College of Southern Maryland, and I help with this magazine every semester, help bring it out. We have the photographs projected here behind me, and tonight is the celebration of you all, you, the contributors of the Spring Magazine. This is the fourth and final reading of the semester. If you look at the magazine, take as many as you'd like to. There are plenty of copies up front here. There's a website, and you can look at the other activities that the college sponsors, and that is readings all year round. This actually is the seventh one of the season of this academic year. The last program of each semester is this one, and that is where we can shine the spotlight on local writers and people from the community, students, etc., and feature their work and give a round of applause to you all, the community of writers and photographers that keep this magazine going. So thank you for coming tonight. Thanks to all the friends and family for showing up. And I wanted to thank very much the editors of the magazine, who you see a list of the editors on the inside cover of the magazine. I'm just one person, and I couldn't do all this without the help of a lot of other people. So please recognize them as well. The other thing is, the English Honor Society here at the College of Southern Maryland has, for the past few years, been so kind in sponsoring a reception at the end of each magazine reading. So I do want to thank the English Honor Society again for their generous contribution to each of these magazine readings. But I do, honestly, I gotta tell you, it's so gratifying to put this magazine together every semester because it focuses on your work. So sit back and relax. The people coming up to read, if you want to give a little background to your photograph or to your story or your poem, you can do so, but you don't have to. You can come up and read. So enjoy. We'll start with Ahmad.
Good evening. College of Southern Maryland. This is a great campus here. I was sitting in the chair there next to my parents. I dragged them out here from Washington, D.C. I thank them for coming. I was reading one of the poems here. I was listening to Neil, but Beach Girls. Jeffrey Beck here? Beck, good stuff. Good stuff. Oath Song is a story about a guy who's listening to the wrong type of music, and it may not be in his best interest to do so. I'm just going to read a selection, and then I'll get to hear from all of you. Okay? Oath Song. And my name is Ahmad Wright. Otha Higgins kissed Lucy on the mouth 17 years ago, and he was excited at the thought that she still might remember him. Last Sunday, the men of the church mentioned her. They whispered amongst themselves and under their breaths. When she sang, they had looked to the ceiling and nodded to the floor, their faces softened as if to recollect on something sweet. Sugar, molasses, in a teapot? Damn, that woman can sing. Otha thought it too. Lucy's voice could enchant the musty church air and permeate the reading of scripture long after a performance. He had only seen her from afar, from the top pew. Then she disappeared after the service. He had to find her and hear her again. That voice that touched his insides and choked tears from his eyes, made his hands tingle too. Everything fell through his fingers if he thought on her too much. Struggling with his backyard garden greens in the soft ground, Otha tugged at the leafy stems to collect the harvest, whistling Lucy's song. In the 90-degree heat, he imagined the sun a tall yellow glass of liquid. He wished he could apply piecemeal to his crop without the humidity. Otha's chest was bare against his coveralls, a robust middle filling the empty spaces. His dark skin glistened like the soil he had taken so much care to set just right, to give his beet garden the glow it deserved. Otha was not a small man, but he crawled in the dirt the same way he walked upright, with a tangible limp due to arthritis in both knees. He knelt to cradle a plant in his hand that had set the wrong way. The beetroot was brittle and dry, inverted, unnaturally. He crushed it in his fist. Otha, you finished yet? You melt out there. Ronell, his wife, yelled from the screen door, electrifying the Virginia air. Otha didn't answer. He never did when he was in the garden. But he worked faster, savoring the beetroots collected in his bucket and the bitter aroma of the scent in his nostrils. He smiled at the purple crimson hull, anticipating the bunch of them at the dinner table hours from now, boiled over rice and pig's feet. Lucy's lips were beet red too, the last time he touched them, draining him of all the air in his chest. 17 years ago, Lucy sang like an anointed angel. Last Sunday, her voice stirred his spirit just the same. The preacher had announced her right before the choir started, and there she was, just like that, 17 years, like a drop in water. Thank you.
Titled Dear Nan, and I'm not going to read from it, but I just want to give you a little bit of information about my grandmother, who this is about. My grandmother passed away a decade ago, and I thought it was be nice to kind of honor her with an open letter. Just tell you a little bit about my grandmother. So she was 81 when she passed. That was in 2004, and that photo is from, I had sat with my grandmother on her 80th birthday to interview her and to do some photos of her. And although I knew most of the stories about my grandmother, I still wanted to have them for my daughters and for my brothers and everyone else. So, so I wrote this, and I'm really grateful to have it part of the Connections issue. Just to give you a little bit about information about my grandmother. So my grandmother was born in 1923. She had 6 siblings, and my great-grandmother had put all of her children in a foster home and an orphanage, or slash, so however that went. And then when my grandmother was 15, she was married. She got married to my grandfather, who was 21 at the time. And one by one, she got all of her siblings out of the orphanage and raised them as her own. And then when she was 17, which was 1940, she and my grandfather were living in Washington, D.C., and in an apartment building. And down the hall lived a lady who was a prostitute, and she had a baby. And she used to sleep, like maybe this was back in the day, they may have done this with kids back then, but she slept in a dresser drawer. So my grandmother, who would always see the lady, she was 17 at the time, and she ended up adopting the baby in 1940. So my grandmother's 17, so she had her siblings that she was taking care of. She had the daughter, and then that baby that she adopted was my mom, and so it was because of my grandmother that my mom had a great life, and that my two brothers and I also had a great life. And, you know, my grandmother never knew that we knew that she wasn't our biological grandmother, because my mom had said that she would have been devastated to think that we knew that she wasn't our, as she would probably have said, our grandmother. But of course, that just endeared her more to us by knowing that the story behind that. So, yeah, so, you know, I'm really grateful to have this in there. And so it's been 10 years since my grandmother's been gone, and my brothers and I, my 2 brothers and my daughters, and, you know, we saw my grandmother every day, or either talked to her. She ended up living with my mom for the last 8 years probably, and we lived next door to my mom. So, but we had always stayed in touch. She raised us like her kids. So, So that's the story of my grandmother. I'm really happy to have that in here.
That was beautiful. Hi, I'm Rachel Heinhorst. My poem is on page 24. And a little bit about it. If you were to ask my children about winter, this winter, they would tell you that it's the best winter ever. However, we know that it had its good times and its bad times. And I felt after I don't know how many cancellations that I faced with my children, snow days home with them, I felt like winter must have been asking for some sort of recognition that apparently our sledding days was not providing. So on one of the quieter afternoons, I decided, well, maybe if I write a poem for winter, it will calm down a bit. And of course, the next week we got the worst of it. So I don't know if it was asking for more, but anyway, this is a poem for winter. This has been a winter with few whispers of spring, I mentioned to my father when I called to check his need of anything for the coming of the newest snow. The freezing days keep our neighborhood ponds frozen, so I don't worry about my son discovering a forbidden bravery, a bravery my childhood winters gave when we gather at the lake on snow days, one foot push, the other foot stand, and if water finds its way atop the ice, 2 steps back. This winter of memories has given time with my daughter in her bedroom, finding long and thick enough socks. I gather and stretch them over her toes and ankles, while she suggests painting her room might be something we can do after snow angels. Come evening, there is peace beneath the couch blankets, just as there is peace beneath the snow-covered ground, where spring waits patiently like us, embraced by winter's gifts. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I think I'm next. I'm Brenda Jones. I work here at the college, and I've been fortunate enough to work with Neil for, 20-some years on this magazine. And I can tell you guys that I like seeing the faces of some of the poets and the authors here today. I don't get to as many as I'd like to. These readings are great, and you guys have such wonderful stories and wonderful poems, and the photography is incredible. For a long time, I've been interested in photography, and I guess it probably started just when my kids were little. I have twin girls, and I would always try to just find that facial expression on one of them that would be different. And I don't know, I guess it just escalated from there, and I always look for the opportunity to do an interesting or an unusual photograph. My photo is Winter Wonderland. It's on page 25. And what happened was talking about the snow, I probably should have submitted the snow angel photograph that I took in my front yard to go with the story because you mentioned a snow angel in the story. There was a day when we had that really fluffy snow that was here, and then the rain came right afterwards, and so all that fluffy snow that was so beautiful on all the trees and the buildings and all was gone within an hour. And it was just a coincidence that I had to run an errand. The snow was done, the rain started. I went outside and I sat in my car, and before I turned the windshield wiper on, I just looked through it. I was sitting right here in this parking lot out here, looking across at the trees. And so what you're seeing is the raindrops on the windshield, looking out over the blanket of snow over all the trees, which I just thought was the neatest thing. So I took the picture and submitted it, and I thought it was kind of a neat picture. And I hope to pursue my love of photography when I retire. I've got about 4 more years here, and then I'll take it from there. But thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Sharon Morose, and I'm actually a first-time student here in January. And I'm going to read to you an essay I wrote. It's entitled Living in the Moment. And what I was going through during the time when I wrote this is a season in my life where I was having to let go. My son joined the military, and most of this is a product of what was going on inside of me when I was having to let him go. So if I tear up, forgive me, because I still have only seen him just very briefly. So living in the moment. Looking back on years past, it is the only if and its counterpart, what if, that tears a heart apart at the seams. Existence is overwhelmed with the busyness of activities, tasks, and self-induced stress and worry. Time is wasted fretting over things that never transpire. All too often, time slips by without being noticed. It is at a crossroad, the transitions of life, that the question enters the mind, where did the time go? With a knotted stomach, piercing lasers soar through the memory of broken promises, uncompleted projects, good intentions not acted upon, and then regrets sneak in like thieves to devour all that is valuable. Thankfully, everyone has an opportunity to learn from their former regrets. No matter our age, each of us can start anew with the rising of the sun. Lives are inundated with looking forward, letting go, and the seasons of an ever-changing world. It is a human habit to wish life away. All have heard a child wish they were grown. Youth is never fully appreciated until adulthood. The fascination of pure discovery, the newness of life, creates adventures everywhere a child's feet lead. Simple things are huge. A clump of trees are a forest, and a puddle is a river. The sidewalk is a highway, and a crack in the pavement is a sport. Reflecting back, honeysuckle has never again smelled so sweet. Even a dangling willow tree becomes the Amazon. These are the days that children wish away in exchange for unending responsibilities. Never has an adult uttered the phrase, if only childhood was not so dreadfully long. In contrast, most adults look back longingly. My mind rewinds to a time gone by, and there I am, all bundled up, snug and warm. The door opens and the frigid air circulates with a commanding presence. Pure white snow blankets the ground. A spray of frost sprinkles my face as I fall to my back, playfully plowing through the fluffy softness with my arms and legs. Rising with extreme caution, I turn around to gaze upon the enchanting snow angel. In a fleeting moment, an angel recaptures my innocence of yesterday. The past should be cherished, but it ought not be where we live. When teenage years are in the past, we emerge into a fast-forward mode. Funny, yet not humorous, how time lasts forever as a child, but the adult years pass with lightning speed. Yesterday a child, today a mother bombarded with countless tasks. It is easy to understand her desire, if only briefly, to obtain peace and quiet. But in a blink of an eye, babies are grown. The day comes when a mother's 6-foot baby walks away with nothing but his backpack. Her eyes burn and tighten prior to the invasion of tears. The lump in her throat prominent when she feels her stomach fall to her already weakened knees. The rapid beat of her heart yearns for time to freeze. Her baby is a man. Where did the time go? Was it fretted away? Anguish rips apart her once whole heart as her busy household, overflowing with activity, turns into a stale, stagnant, dead silence. In her deep sadness, regret and guilt consume her over the lost moments. It is said that the greatest pain for a woman is childbirth. However, it does not compare to nurturing a child for 19 years, then having to muster the strength to let go. Relentless and unmerciful, the clock ticks on. It can be a friend or an enemy, and it is our choice as to how it will serve us. Holding on to what holds us down causes us to remain in the past as the world moves ahead. My sufferings have been many. However, they are now insignificant aside from the lessons they taught. The treasured moments are when my heart, soul, and strength were planted firmly in the here and now, embracing the season at hand, putting the past behind me, and trusting the future to tomorrow releases me for the joy of today. Guilt melts away like snow when life is lived one day at a time. Precious memories are made when the current season of my life is embraced. Even the painful moments are a blessing. Pondering a solution to reverse the habit of dwelling on what has been and dashing to what is yet to come. It is my belief that one must be diligently mindful to change the cycle. As this was written, the thought, "Wish it was Friday," popped into my head. When will it ever end? Each morning, a commitment must be established to seize the day. Grasp loosely to the positive events of yesterday. The ticking of the clock laboriously continues to advance. This hour will never return. And with the next tuck, it is gone forever. We should spend our days in the peace of the present, which will provide for a more pleasant tomorrow. We all have a choice to make. The rising of the sun offers a new day to live. Live each one to the fullest, for one day will be the final sunrise. Thank you.
The great thing about poetry is it's all around us. It happens all the time. If we can just see it when it happens. If we can just observe closely those humorous and beautiful and funny and sad and significant things around us and find the words, we'll see poetry. My wife wrote this poem and I just wrote it down. It's called Beach Girl, his wife. My wife's name's Marjorie, by the way. "See you next year, Beach," she said plaintively in her rear view. But I knew then she would never leave the beach entirely. The wet sand always clinging under the curl of her toes. She would always wake to hear the lapping waves shh in the conches of her sleepy ears. Her ringlets still twisting like ocean currents. Her shoulders still freckled and wet with the salt spray by the pier. And then I knew I'd always love it too. Not for the warm sand, or chill waves, or ice-cold beer, but for the sun-warm smile of a lovely beach girl.
Hi, I'm Judy Allen Leventhal, and my poem's on page 34. This is a poem, as the last poet mentioned, sometimes we do things and the poem's already there. I don't know if any of you have been to Denali Park in Alaska? Yes? So you'll know what this is. Everything is like, oh my goodness, how could that possibly be? And as you get closer, the language starts to be that way too. The words, the terms, the magnitude of it all. But at the same time, there's this small flower that it's a lupine that's everywhere as well. And it's almost as if this together, you see that the grandness is dependent on the small, which is not so small in reality. At any rate, so these sounds and these words really just kept collecting as we got closer to the park and got into the park. I just kept keeping track of the words, and next thing you know is I put them in a row. So the dedication is to a friend who died this last January, Dylan McGargle, who was a instrument maker. If any of you are dulcimer players or whatever, you might know him. And he was a very kind and modest sort of person, but quite a great person. And he's really the small lupine, the flower. So he would probably be upset, actually, to have any kind of recognition at all, but here, that's done. So the poem is called The Poetry of Denali, a confluence of sounds and spectacle. Cacophonous journey through Wasilla and Takitna en route north from Anchorage. Later, alongside the Teklanika River running westward toward McKinley's Majesty. Dusty hairpin turns around Wilbert's nose, a Proboscis giganticus. And this thing is enormous. You go around this thing, and it's a nose that the buses can hardly maneuver. So I'm ruining the poem, but it's truly unbelievable. Dusty hairpin turns around Wilbert's nose, a proboscis giganticus, leading onward to Cantishna Lodge and Roadhouse at Denali's Heart. Along the way, both coming and going, musical euphony of Wonder Lake, Polychrome Mountain, and weather permitting, vistas of the Great Alaska Range from Eielson Center. Reassuring the alliterative and assonant of caribou, cow moose, kettle ponds, and grizzlies, the taiga and tundra of the boreal forest, nourished by the savage and sanctuary rivers, and charmed by Igloo Creek. All of this, rooted in the sublime lupines, roadside modesty.
Hi, I'm Russell Yaffe. I'm from Bethesda, and I'm a filmmaker primarily, but I also love to write. And I'm really thankful to have the chance to share my work here in Maryland at home with local writers. It's a really special experience, so I'm really thankful for that. My story is Charlie. It's on page 20, and I'll just go right into it. Charlie died when he was 9. He was my best friend at the time. Everybody expected Charlie to get better, just like so many other kids lauded for their strength and perseverance in the face of a vicious disease. But Charlie did not get better. Miss Gleason called us all to the rug one day, and Dr. Meredith was there. Dr. Meredith only showed up to talk to us when something real bad had happened. Everybody knew that Charlie was my best friend. I used to do everything with Charlie. No one ever asked Charlie to be his partner for anything at school, because I was always Charlie's partner. We used to roam the neighborhood together on our bikes. Parents confused our names all the time. When Charlie stopped coming to school, I was lost. I had to find new friends. Even though everyone knew my best friend, my only real friend, was Charlie. And I remember feeling for a while like any other kid was just a temporary substitute for him. I'd play with Derek just until Charlie got better, or James, or Chris. I wrote letters to Charlie, and he wrote back, but it wasn't the same. Charlie and I were born a month apart in 1971. We met in kindergarten, and we were best friends by the end of the first day of school. We both loved Legos. We became obsessed with building models out of the small plastic blocks. They started out simple and amorphous to all but our 5-year-old eyes, yet by the 3rd grade, we had constructed a minor city in Charlie's basement. I brought my mother over to Charlie's house one day so that she could see it. She was blown away, and we were so proud. My brother Danny was always mean to Charlie. He would take every opportunity to tease Charlie whenever Charlie came over. Danny knocked down one of our Lego towers once, allegedly by accident. Charlie started to cry, and my mother yelled at Danny pretty good. I knew Danny did it on purpose because I saw him smile as the tower came crashing down. Danny apologized to Charlie without really meaning it. We tended to play at Charlie's house after that. My parents brought me to the hospital to visit Charlie only once, even though he was my best friend, and at the time I was glad that I didn't have to see Charlie at the hospital. I didn't like seeing him weak and balding, stranded in a cold blue ocean of a bed, the place he would only leave once he left the world for good. I remember when Dr. Meredith started to speak to the class. Miss Gleason began to cry, and that scared me. Dr. Meredith explained it as plainly as she could, as clearly as she could. I understood what she was saying. I understood better than any of the other kids, and I started to cry, and I didn't stop. When you're a kid, you don't leave the room when some uncontrollable physical thing comes over you. You just stay there and let it happen. I cried and let it happen. Miss Gleason took me out into the hall. She gave me a hug and tried to console me and herself. I didn't know what to do. Who was going to be my best friend now? It was a stupid thought, the only stupid thought I could come up with. Who was going to be my best friend? We went to the funeral, the whole family. Me, my mom, my dad, Danny. Danny was old enough to get it, and he was old enough to hate himself for how he had treated Charlie. Danny stuck by me throughout the day. I was happy to have him there. Charlie's parents were reduced to nothing. They didn't speak. They cried quiet tears that dried on their cheeks and left permanent scars. No one talked to them because there was nothing to say. Worst of all, they had seen the day coming for months, and they had feared it constantly. All of their energies had been spent trying to save Charlie for a year. Then all of their energies were spent coping with the knowledge that they would never succeed in that pursuit. Sometimes I think about what those last few days might have been like for Charlie, if he knew his life was ending. What did that mean to a 9-year-old? I sent my last letter to him about a month before he died. He never wrote back to me. and I hadn't received a response after a couple of weeks, I knew something was wrong. I wish I had visited Charlie one more time just to say goodbye. I thought about him all the time and missed him, but he might not have known that. I always wrote silly things to him. My mother helped me with the letters, and I always signed off, "Hope you feel better soon." I wanted Charlie to get better more than anything, but maybe that didn't come through enough in the letters alone. Charlie might have died thinking I didn't care that much about him. That still pains me. Maybe Charlie didn't even really think of me as his best friend. Everybody gets cancer nowadays. It's hard to keep track of which of my friends have the disease and which don't. I've watched friends lose their kids to cancer, not as young as Charlie, though that doesn't make it any easier. My neighbor's daughter died from it 10 years ago. Danny succumbed a few years back. Sometimes I forget I have cancer, the blessed benign kind, but cancer nonetheless. I've lost so many to it, but Charlie was the first. Charlie was the first, and Charlie was the toughest to lose. Charlie would have turned 70 today. I often wonder if he would still be my best friend. The Legos would have ended at some point. Middle school would have happened, high school, college. Who knows what kind of person Charlie would have become, or what kind of person I would have become had Charlie been there. I made other friends, but none as good as Charlie, not the way I remember it. My friendship with Charlie, plastered in time on a plane above all others. Maybe he'd still have been that person in my life today. 2 wives, 3 kids, 6 or 7 close friends to date, and there would be Charlie, good old Charlie. Or maybe that's nothing more than a pointless fantasy. So many of my friendships have dissipated over the years. People who I considered my closest friends 30 years ago have been out of my life for 20. Charlie might have become someone I recalled fleetingly, if at all. Some retiree living in Hawaii who looked forward to games of backgammon by the beach and infrequent visits from his grandchildren. And maybe I would find him on the internet, see what he's been up to after all these years. Or not. But Charlie died when he was 9. My best friend at the time, my best friend forever.
I wrote on flying and falling on page 15, and I found it easier to share the poems that I write because they've been about my joy and about my heart and about my passion, and this has been about my vulnerability in a moment of great sadness for my family. In December, my father fell 3 stories off of the roof of the house, and he broke his back and his ribs and his leg and was really hurt, but he's doing better now. So just to let you know, just to preface it, he's fine, he's alive. But this is a story about that experience. So on flying and falling. From the highest peak of the house, you called down to me. All the best people are born in December, you and me and Jesus. And there we were, the day after my birthday, 2 weeks beyond yours, decorating for Jesus's, the day you fell. And I, who always dreamt of flying and never of falling, who always dreamed of rescuing and never of being rescued, would have called out your name if it weren't your blood that pierced my skin and the sidewalk. It was the day that I learned new nightmares, replaying the scene 1,000 times over, 1,000 times wingless, 1,000 times broken. I never saw the angels that braced the weight of your impact on the solid stone staircase, although the image of singed winged giants requesting reassignment brings a peace that I carry with me. And I, who once possessed the unshaken faith belonging only to 5-year-olds, who once heard your key turn in the door and leapt from the summit of a carpeted staircase into the safety of your arms, would have longed to be the solid arms of sensibility that caught you before you reached the valley called consequence. But I have never been the one accused of sensibility, level-headedness, logic, or any of the other burdens that leave men flightless. Surely it was only for this known character flaw that you allowed me to play a role in your adventure that day. And you, the man who asks only for forgiveness but never permission, the man who others call for help but would never ask it for himself. You called me to join you upon the ladder, upon the roof, upon the heights that define adulthood. What a badge of honor to be chosen, or defaulted to to jointly bypass the stinging bites of conscience in exchange for the 32 years elusive prize of approval. Temporary access into the paternal realm of questionable judgment, typically reserved for earthbound male comrades endowed with the authority to override instinctual warnings for the secret honor of risk-based reward. And I, your heaven-bound daughter, who dreams only of flying and never of falling, join the tired ranks of expressionless soldiers who keep sentry over hospital beds and trauma wards made of white cinder block and hand sanitizer, and women who are no longer able to make the pre-Thanksgiving call to their fathers to ask Googleable questions about cooking temperatures and turkey brine recipes, who no longer visit their assigned location of mourning, patches of earth where sodded grass yields only white headstone and artificial flowers. They offered me wordless wisdom, keenly sensing I was the sort to prefer embracing over conversation anyway. This was the kind of silence that I had come to crave, the kind of love unobstructed by language that sinks deep into the heart of a winged person who weighs hearts more than words. It wasn't the biting kind of silence, marked by disapproval, that seemed to chase me even after I had a home of my own. Not the kind that sat lurking in the bushes waiting for me on the infinite journey down the quarter-mile stretch of driveway as I returned to your home after entrusting you to the metal-winged rescuers who preferred to do their flying with eyes open. Meals, cards, generosity, and judgment came to visit, and I, who should have led and not followed, who should have spoken up and out, who should have known the proper formula for disengagement, who should have erected and established boundaries, who should have more reason than faith, who should have grown up faster, who should have made something of myself by now, who should have wore shoes and not wings, who should have, did not. I'm not done. 12 feet of earth and air separate the horizontal from the vertical man. And though fallen, we have been infused with the divine, and so we rise. Together we lay aside the burden of weight and wings to share a piece of space and time, watching winter birds feed upon generous seed offerings that bid them come. Fallen man, God bids you stand. Stand and be redeemed, and you shall come to walk again, and I, for the very first time, upon feet as well as wings.
My name is Peyton Reynolds, and my poem is called These Hands. I think it's on page 42. And I don't know if I really have a background to it. It's just about how, I guess you could say it's a love poem for my hands, because hands are your most intimate thing, you know? You do everything with them. You touch people with them, you touch everything. So it's kind of the most overlooked part of our body, I feel like. So that's where it comes from. But it's, these hands, not yet rough from labor and not yet burnt from fire. These hands, which have touched everything I have touched, which have felt everything that I have felt. These hands are special. These hands, which hold life, juggle love, and sense not only material objects, but rather the world in its entirety. These hands are wonderful. And to have held these hands, as I find my mother has held me, and my father carried me, and my sister hugged me, and as I have destroyed myself. To have held these hands, and to touch everything I have touched, and to have felt everything that I have felt, and everything that I have held. Hands are amazing.
My name's Ethan Fugate. I'm going to be reading a piece entitled The Act of Forgetting a Lover in Whiskey. It's on page 44. But first, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and all the editors, especially Neil, because he helped me workshop this poem back in February, I believe. It was written in November of 2013. And the background to this poem is, this is probably the most important poem I've ever written, and I've been doing this for about 5 years. It's about my recovery from alcoholism, and this is the first poem I ever wrote after I got sober. It's going to be a very cathartic reading for me tonight, because I had my 6th month of sobriety on this past Sunday, and I'm going to actually say the last line and mean it. So here we go. The act of forgetting a lover and whiskey. 1. Her. I wake every morning to the chimes of bells, ringing on some forgotten seashore, her arms swaying gracefully in the rhythm of the sea breeze, squalling against tall blades of grass. The progression of seasons upends me. The silence of a morning wreathed in new snow hushes the vexing bells and stops my ears from humming. There are only vestiges left. Often I can make out the silhouettes of her comeliness, but nothing about her figure. 2. Whiskey. It hasn't been too long, and it is awkward to say, I'm better off without it. I can see it from my window, that neon calling me gently. I leer and loom, blenching in the reveries of her as phantoms, forever escaping a never-ending coquetry. I'm better off without it. Thank you.
This is historical fiction. The Leif that's talked about is really my great-grandfather Lafayette, but this is fiction. We're in the mountains of North Carolina, Tennessee, during the Civil War. Tennessee is Northern Territory, but this doesn't touch on that. It just gives you the context and the geography. Runaway, Flat Top Mountain near the Blue Ridge, Boone, North Carolina, November 1862. Sarah Elrod cut up a pumpkin to go with Squirrel for the evening meal. Leif, bring in an armload of wood before evening sets in. Leif, who worked for his room and board and to learn farming, walked out of the open cabin door and bent beside the woodpile behind the house to grab some thick branches before taking up split logs. Master Leif! Leif looked toward the woods but didn't see anything in the shadows. Then he spotted Ben, concealed behind the laurel. Ben, is that you? It had been years since he'd seen the escaped slave. What are you doing here? I run away. Leif scowled as Ben continued. My master sold Mammy to the Bensons near Charlotte, an overseer. He beat me every day at suiting. Been like that ever since we ran away. I'm his fastest worker. I know he won't hurt me bad, so I can't work. He'll kill you this time if he catches you. I had to do it. I got to help my Mammy. Go north and earn money to buy her freedom. I heard slaves saving up to buy their freedom. Those men have a trade. They hire out Sundays. Master won't let me learn a trade, and he takes all our Sunday earnings. I want to learn smithing, not always work in the fields. How'd you make it this far? Overseer drove Mammy to Charlotte, so I had 2 days to run. I stayed to the woods and moved at night. Some riders went by, but they didn't have dogs. When I got to the Blue Ridge, I couldn't cut through the thickets. I had to use the road. Leif moved the two of them behind the laurel in case Sarah stepped around the corner. Then continued. I met 2 men coming down the mountain. It was dark. They started asking me questions. I told them I was rent out to your Mammy, Miss Lydia, on Dutch Creek. Told them I was to help her over the winter. Then I had to return to my master come planting time. Did they believe you? No man believe a white man. No white man believe a black man. Told them I got to be there by tomorrow night, sundown, or Miss Lydia ain't gonna pay the full amount. The men was on their way to Lenore. Then the small man took up a whip. You lying, boy? No, sir, I said. Gospel truth. I got to be there tomorrow, sundown, up Dutch Creek. That's what overseer said. He snapped his whip at my feet. I acted like it didn't hurt, but then the big one said, we got to go. Let him go. The small one told me to get up in a big oak and kept snapping. You stay up there, the big one said. We're coming back at daylight with the sheriff, and you better be there. As soon as they was gone, I ran up the road till I come to that trail over the Watauga Gap that we took last time. How'd you find me here? I met an old couple going the other way. Said I was going to Miss Lydia's. They told me how to find you and said you could help me. Glad they didn't start asking questions. Seemed like they already knew I'd run away and didn't mind helping. Leif glanced over his shoulder. Bill went out hunting and took the dogs with him. He'll be back pretty soon. You got to leave. Go over the creek, then walk downstream in it about at least a half a mile so the dogs can't smell you. Leif paused. Tomorrow everyone's going to town. I'll have to stay home and work on my reading. You stay near the creek till I come for you. Don't go on the east side of the mountain by Rayin Rocks. Outliers hide there, along with deserters and fugitives from the Salisbury prison. Leif glanced down at Ben's feet and noticed the scab welts streaking the skin. He winced, thinking about the cold water biting the cuts. Try to stay in the creek. Ben headed back into the underbrush. Leif scrounged the wood for an old possum carcass the dogs had dragged home earlier. He grabbed it by the tail and swept it back and forth on the ground behind the woodpile and over Ben's trail. In the morning, he gathered some wood and followed the creek until Ben showed himself. They cut west and waded through the grasses on the bald on the top of the next ridge. Water now flowed west toward the Mississippi, and the boys walked downhill from there toward Shule's Mill. When they reached the Watauga Gap Road, they kept to the outside of the natural hedgerows of the mountain laurel and rhododendron so they wouldn't get trapped on the road. The old forest was easy walking. When someone approached, they slipped behind the trees. "How come you used my mammy's name?" Leif said with an accusing tone. "She got the only name I know. I don't think they'd hurt her being a white woman and all," Ben explained. Leif pondered Ben's answer, not sure if it was bad or not. Then he asked, "What if the Yankee soldiers catch you?" "I'm thinking about fighting for Mr. Lincoln. He's going to free the slaves." "I thought you were planning to earn money to free your mammy." "I'm doing both. You can do everything in the North." "You don't love North Carolina? When I'm big, I'm fighting for North Carolina. If I see you, I'll shoot," Leif said. Ben looked down and shook his head. "I won't shoot you, Mr. Leif." "Well," Ben hesitated, "if I see somebody who looks like you, I won't fire. I'll be beholden." Once the land began to level out, the boys walked in silence. When they came within hearing of the mill, Leif stopped behind a grove of big spruce trees and blackberry bushes. Leif spoke quietly. "I figure I walk you by the mill and we say I'm showing you the way to my ma's." "You surely know more than I do, but white folks don't believe me, and you know it's just a boy. You'd be getting yourself in a peck of trouble." Leif dug in his toe. "Then you best hide here until it's dark. Follow the river downstream and cross over the bridge. Then climb up Pine Ridge until you get to the old bear trail and follow the river upstream. That trail will take you over to Snake Den Ridge." Ben glanced at Leif when he heard snakes mentioned. Leif didn't notice. He was clearing space. He grabbed a stick and drew a long line across the bottom. And if you want to watch, go to right the very middle of your books. The map is there. He grabbed a stick and drew a long line across the bottom of the right-hand side. "This is the Watauga River. You're at the river bend. You're here at the river bend." Leif marked an X. "Cross the bridge here." He slashed 2 lines over the river. "Then on the west side of the river, you got 3 ridges: Pine Ridge, Snake Den Ridge, and Nettle Knob. The bear trail will take you along all 3. He drew 3 narrow circles in a row above the river and marked the trail. On the other side of Nettle Knob, you come to a trail crossing over the ridge. That's the one you took last time. Cross over the ridge and follow it down to my mammy's." There he drew a house. "If I get lost?" Ben looked worried. Leif bent back over his map, and above the ridges he drew a long cross on its side, with the top touching the Watauga River on the right and his ma's place on the left. "If you get lost, cross over the ridges to Valley Crucis. That means Valley of the Cross. These are creeks." He tapped the stick on the arms of the cross. "They meet at one point here." He stabbed the center of the cross. "This one in the middle is Dutch Creek. Follow it up the valley. That'll take you to Ma's. After that, just keep up the creek to Hanging Rock. It's where you went before. Then follow the roads west to Banner Elk and find Louis Banner's place. He's a Federalist, but he owns slaves, so wait until dark and go to his slaves, Aunt Reen and Uncle Simon. They'll see you get to Tennessee." Leif straightened and gave Ben time to study the map. "Which way is north?" Ben asked. Leif pointed a little to the right and marked the map with a star and an N. Ben studied the map, then Leif scuffed leaves over it. He looked at Ben with wisdom beyond his age. "Be careful." Leif paused. "I have something of yours." Ben recognized his mother's pamphlet of Bible stories he had entrusted to Leif 4 years earlier. Ben stared at the booklet, then at Leif. He had met white folks who were kind, but never any who respected his property. "Thank you, Master Leif." Leif started quietly back up toward Flat Top Mountain. After a mile, he slipped over the road, not worried about the sound of approaching horses. 3 riders, on the signal from their leader, fanned out around Leif. The boy looked up into Mac's sneering smile. "You been helping any escaped contraband lately?" the slave catcher asked. "No." Mac laughed. "I was under the impression they were your best friends." Ha! His companions guffawed as Mac nudged his horse around the boy and continued down the mountain. A silent rage crossed with fear rendered Leif mute as the men rode by. Then he felt a surge of relief. Mac hadn't mentioned any runaways.
That was really good. I really enjoyed that. And so thank you all for coming. And one more round of applause for all the people that read tonight.